Happy Friday. Happy Friday to everyone. Thanks for being here. If you are on here, please get those likes up. Get those likes up, tag anybody, or share this conversation with someone that you think may find it interesting. I'm pretty excited about today's topic. As I mentioned before, in the community post I just shared, that I'm going to be covering off over the next 4 weeks, just the origins of African Americans, Black Americans. I know there's a lot of different terms. There's a lot of controversy behind these different terms. I'm going to be covering off this with Dr. Jahi Issa. He is a PhD historian and has a lot to say on this topic. Many of you guys know that there's just a lot of popular ideas going around today in the Black community, period, about who we are, where we came from. And, you know, I've done my own research, but I thought it would be a lot better to just bring on an expert in this topic and have him really share some of the different things that he's uncovered over his many years of study. So I'm excited to have him on to share with us. I'm going to be taking notes. I'm going to be putting on my listening ears. So this will be fun. Hey, how's it going? Also, guys, if you would like to show support to the show, please do so. You can find me on Cash App or Venmo. Also, I will be sure to acknowledge all super chats. So without further ado, I will bring on today's special guest and we will have him share his knowledge. Hello.
Hey, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I like your platform and your brand.
Oh,
I see
thank
the
you.
whole black thing, this San Francisco original Black Panther look with the chic off pink. Yeah, I like that. That's all right. That's very very Tupac-ish.
Tupac. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm gonna take that as a compliment. Well, again, thank you for being here. I appreciate your time. Like I said, this topic, I'm sure you know much more about, obviously, how popular it is, how there's a lot of ideas floating around on the YouTube space and digital platform. And I don't pretend to be the expert. I've done a little bit of my own research, but obviously you're the expert on this. And so I'm grateful for you being here and sharing just some of the different things that you've learned about these entire topics over years of study. So just first of all, thank you. And I'm excited to hear what you have to share with us.
Yeah, what the world is missing is good content, and a lot of us have cognitive distance, which is a psychological word that just means that whenever we're presented with new information, we have a hard, especially when the new information tops or is more credible than the old information, we have a very hard time accepting it. It can't fit within our conceptual framework in which we've had this old information. And so with this topic, it's going to be difficult for a lot of people because we have a lot of people who are not really trained in understanding information, but who are presenting themselves as experts in certain areas, and they are actually misleading people. And so I'm happy that you've invited me on your platform. I've been dormant for many years, but I want to say hi to the people. I got about 70 people watching live on the Anointed Hands, and I think the moderator Stewart, because that video that we did, that you and Giles did, it's already gotten 14,000 views.
Oh wow!
So yeah, the little video. So we're praying that we'll have 100 or so people who can support us and come on May the 3rd and support this effort, because this type of knowledge, it takes time. It's expensive. I'm in the Gambia, West Africa now, doing research. I'm going into villages, studying in Senegal. I was in Senegal this past weekend, looking at villages, talking to chiefs, and talking to chiefs and religious leaders about when people, when they moved into this certain areas. So there's been a lot of movement on the African continent over the last 500 years, and a lot of this has to do with the slave trade. And so, yeah, I'm excited to present this new field of study. It's not really new; it's old, but I'm excited to come on your platform like this, and let's get it on.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, again, thank you for being here. Guys, if we're just logging on there, please get those likes up, tag anybody, or share this with someone that you think may find it interesting. Also, if you do send in a super chat, I will be sure to acknowledge all super chats. So just to get right into things, now I know you kind of briefly talked about what you've been doing as of late out in the continent. Is there anything else that you would like the audience to know about you? It's just as far as what you do, just some important information about yourself up until this point.
There. Well, I have a. I'll say this. I mean, I was born and reared in St. Louis, Missouri. Um, um, my family, we come out of Mississippi and Arkansas. I was just talking to my auntie about this subject a second ago, not too long ago, and can you see me properly?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, all right. My auntie was talking to some other relatives because we're having our family reunion in a couple of months in Texas, and I was just telling them that I've come to the terms to understand why we can't trace our history back past the 1840s to 1850s. And this is the nature of our conversation today. But I was born and reared in St. Louis, Missouri. My family comes out of the George Webby Project. We're working class Black folk. I just happened to have had the opportunity because my mother moved into an area called St. Louis County. It's a decent school district. And I had a chance to get a decent Western or European, or Eurocentric education, and was able to matriculate into college and to graduate school, and got my PhD from Howard University. My family, I lived a short time in Ferguson, Missouri, and I was also engaged in that revolution there after the killing of my man Mike Brown. And one of the brothers who got the longest prison sentence, he's still in jail now. His name is Williams. Can't even think of his name, but he's been in jail for 8 years, for some petty stuff they set him up on. But, I've been an activist all my life, engaged in high school. Most of my family on my mother's side, we come out of the Nation of Islam. And so I grew up with that background. And of course, I come out of a time period, where the African-centered movement, where it was just in vogue to be Black, where you can be on a corner conversation and talk about Nubia and Kemet and all of that. And that was deeply ingrained in hip hop. And so that's the period. But I went to Southern University, where I played football, and then transferred to Texas Southern, where I graduated. Then I went on to Emory University, Cantler School of Theology. I thought I was going to be a minister, and started my Master's of Divinity program, but left that after a year and went to back to Southern University in Baton Rouge, got my Master's in Social Science, and then got accepted to Howard and finished my PhD there. So I'm just really excited to be here. And I've been to Africa over, I stopped counting at about 50. I think I went 4 or 5 times last year. But I've done a lot of work. I've studied in Kemet, lived in Kemet, Ethiopia, Ghana. My children are from Ghana. I have 3 children, 4 children. My oldest 2, Koswa Santawa and Jahi Issa, they were born in Ghana. And my youngest 2, who are 16 and 13, their mother's from Ghana, but they're with me in the Gambia. One thing that I am proud of that my mother my mother passed away more than a decade ago, and I never had a chance to take her back to Africa and take her through the slave dungeons. But I was able to take my oldest sister a year and a half ago, and I was able to take all of my children back, although two of them were born there, but I took each and every one of my four children through the slave dungeons in Ghana so that they would know on their father's side what happened, that we were not, that we are not on this father's side, we're not indigenous to the North American continent, that something happened in our history that brought a melanated person like myself into what is now known as St. Louis, Missouri. And so I have a lot of research out there on this topic. I'm finishing up a book also. I'm also basically finished a book on Garveyism, and it's attached to this concept of 1808 or the illegal slave trade, which is going to be new information. It's going to be a watershed information because digging up this type of history is extremely difficult because there has been a cover up on the highest level regarding this. And this is what we're going to talk about specifically on May the 3rd. I'm going to do a PowerPoint presentation on this. So it's very important that people sign up now and support this type of research because it is time consuming, it's extremely expensive, extremely. But I've been using my own money, my own time, because it's a passion of love. So it's love, you know, to make this type of contribution for Black people.
Okay, awesome. Shout out to Dapper Gents with the 10 on the super chat. I appreciate you. I appreciate you. I also see the 15 that came through also on the Cash App. Again, much love and much appreciated. If you are on here, get those likes up. Also tag anybody, share this with someone. And also super chats are open. I will be sure to acknowledge all super chats. So just going on to the first question, were the majority of Black people in America already here?
Well, it depends on how you define Black people. Even the concept of race as we know it didn't exist in the 16th century. There's a book that I want to bring to everybody's attention that I use in my African American history class. I am a university professor. I do teach in the CUNY, the City University of New York system, although none of my views or comments today represent my job or my university where I am employed. But in my United States history and African American history class, I always deal with this one book. It's called The Invention of the White Race. The Invention of the White Race by Theodore Allen, right? And in this book, he traces the origins of race, the origins of the concept of race. And if we were to go back to colonial America, when we say colonial America, we're talking about 1619, particularly as it regards to the British. When we talk about 1619, that's when the British were able to set up a permanent settlement on Plymouth Rock, as we all know that narrative. A lot of us know that narrative. But all the way up until the 18th century, there was no concept of race. If you were to go to colonial Virginia or Maryland or New York in 1720 and say, hey, Mr. White Man and Mr. Black Man, everybody would look at you crazy because they'll be like, well, where's the white person? I'm a Dutch. I'm an Englishman. I'm a Frenchman. There was no concept of Black and white as we know it. That is an invention, and it's very much a British and American invention, and they perfected that invention over time. So when you say if Black people were here, if you're referring to the group of people who came over, the indigenous people who came over 50,000 years ago? Yes. I don't know if some of us remember about 3 years ago, there's a group of people out on the Indian Ocean. They're very dark and melanated, and they have this funny diplomacy. You come near them, you're going to get about 400 poison darts aimed at you. And there was this one American missionary. He said he wanted to go over and civilize them, and he went over with a Bible, and they killed him. But this group of people left Africa more than 130,000 years ago, and they still look like they're from East Africa, but their DNA is not solely the same as somebody from East Africa. So when we say Black people, yes, they were melanated people. We know about the Kingdom of Hawaii. We know about the Peloponnesian Islands, right? But we also know, through some evidence that there's a great possibility that West Africans may have come to the North American continent. But none of that discounts the fact of how people like myself, got to the United States. And so, yes, there were Black people here, melanated, but would they have considered themselves Black in the way that we understand it? Absolutely not. And a lot of them were wiped out. I hear a lot of these layman historians making all of these claims about, reverse slave trade, and there was no slave trade, and and all this stuff baffles me, because I also see that a lot of these people who are saying that they're Aboriginals, all of a sudden, since California said they're going to give out some money, they've dropped that. I mean, I don't know what they're going to do with that. They're going back and forth, which I think is really the nature of why we're having this particular show today. Mm-hmm. And so, yes and no to that answer.
Yes. Okay. So yes, there were dark-skinned, melanated people here beforehand, and also yes, there are obviously dark-skinned, melanated people that were forced to come here against their own will. Is essentially what.
Yes. So that's the issue, and what's going on now. And I really believe that the real issue of this misinformation may really be designed to prevent a significant number of people from getting any type of compensation for the illegal slave trade. So let's say if you say that your ancestor is Cherokee, right? If your ancestors are Cherokee, then your people signed various treaties with the British and with the Americans. The British held the North American territory up until 1776. That's when the Americans proclaimed their independence, and they ended up actually getting their independence a decade later, a little over a decade later, in the 1780s. And then, so you're talking about two different sets of governments, right? And so, okay, this is where people get confused. So when we start talking about places like California and reparations, which I know you're going to get into, if you say that you're Cherokee, then this has nothing to do with you. You understand? Because your treaty was with the Americans or with the British, or that treaty carried over from the British to the Americans, and you have sovereign land that they recognize. So this has nothing to do with you. So you got to make some decisions, and I hope and pray that people are not putting their names on forms and saying, hey, I'm this and I'm that, because if you do, or if you have, you can forget it. Reparations will come, and it's not going to come like the way you think, or why you think it may or may not happen. It's going to come because, as my dear friend Dr. Salim Farji told me about 4 years ago, he basically said, look, billionaires have had several meetings over the last couple of years on how they're going to save capitalism. And we see this ongoing war with Russia, this socialist communist country, which is really about China. The war is really about checking China, right? And their super duper economy that's engulfing the entire world, right? And the West represented, the head of capitalism represented by the United States. So they are really trying to save capitalism. And if they have to give out a few $1 trillion to save capitalism, they will. And this is what we're seeing with what's going on in California and in Illinois. And there have been numerous of churches giving reparations, but they're not giving it for what you think they're giving it for. They're not even talking about the real reason they're giving it for. And I'm going to address this in great detail on May the 3rd. So you got to sign up to see this.
Definitely. So you're basically saying that you believe a lot of this misinformation out there is a way to try to essentially defraud or keep people who are owed reparations or some kind of restitution from getting it. Because if they align themselves with something that's false, they, to a certain extent, undermine any possibilities they could have of getting reparations or getting what they're owed.
Yes, absolutely. I think this is the reason, and this is why you have people who are coming out and making these so-called expert claims. And, if anybody who's an expert really listens to them, you're like, what did he just say? And why is this person saying this now? When 5-6 years ago, he wasn't saying this. And, and so, and they're getting a lot of traction. And honestly, I thought it was a joke. I'm going to be honest. I had heard people talk about these individuals and over the years, but I didn't think that people were actually following them. I was like, then when I started about 2 weeks listening to some of their stuff, and I'm like, oh my God, this is just woefully wrong and intentionally misleading on all accounts. And so, and then when California passed that law, in which they got a long way to go, and hopefully this work that we're doing is going to really open up the door for some real conversations that need to be had, and that is the issue of the illegal slave trade. So,
right,
I'm listening.
Absolutely. Real quick, I want to acknowledge some of the different super chats that came through. Shout out again to Dapper Gents with the 5 on the super chat. Also, I see J John 440 with a $5 super chat. Again, much appreciated. I see Google Walter Plecker. He reclassified Black Native Americans to Black to prevent them from getting any of the reparations money the natives got. We're actually going to get into that a little later on. So good point. That's a really good point you did make. Also, guys, if you were on here, get those likes up, y'all. Get those likes up. Tag anybody. Share this is someone that you think may find this interesting. And I'm going to move on real quick to the next question. So, okay. Did our ancestors here in America ever call themselves African?
Which ancestors are you referring to? Now, are you referring to those melanated people who were basically wiped out after several hundred years of genocidal warfare on them from the Spanish, the Portuguese, the French, and the Dutch, and the British, and later on the Americans? Or are you talking about those Africans, those tens of millions of Africans who were brought over from West Africa and Central Africa and Southern Africa and some from East Africa via the transatlantic slave trade?
I would say I'm referring to the ones that most African Americans today, Black people, however you want to put it, would connect their ancestry to.
Okay, well then that's a whole nother topic, because there's a book that you need to look at. I was just telling my man Stuart about this. And we have to do a topic on it. It's called Exchanging Our Country Marks. It's by a well-known scholar out of New York University called Michael Gomez. He is an African American, and it's called Exchanging Our Country Marks: The Transformation of African Identities. And the book is the first scientific study that shows how we evolved from Igbo, Hausa, Babalinke, Yoruba, Akan, Wolof, Ser, Bambara, etc., to one group. There's a process that happened, right? And the concept of African was not used at this time in Afrika. This is something that was created in the African diaspora to help us deal with an enemy that was greater than we could have ever imagined, because when they put us on those slave ships, we really did not understand why, because in some regards you will have some Africans who were employed as mercenaries by Europeans. They gave them guns and other things to go and invade other African states to bring them over to the Americas for the purpose of labor. And then can you imagine, here you are, sister. How do you pronounce your name, sister?
Shay Sade is all right.
Sade, sister Sade. Shay Sade. Let's say you are Wolof, right? And let's say you're a Wolof, and the Bambara invaded your kingdom and took you away, right? Made war, killed 70% of the people, and took all the children, sold you to the European. The European puts you on the ship, right? But on the way of being sold to the Europeans on the coast, the European changes his mind and also snatches up the Bambara.
Okay.
That brought you there. And here y'all are on the same ship, right? Traveling to Mississippi or Alabama or North Carolina. What do you think is going to happen once y'all get off those slave blocks?
I mean, I'm thinking they're just going to classify you all as the same.
No. What do you think is going to happen between you and that Bambara who killed your mama and daddy? Put you on that. It's on. So that's exactly what was going on. But something happened. A series of events happened in our history that changed all of that and made us to understand that we were one African group. And Michael Gomez's work details that. It's a classic study. It should have gotten an award, but it's one of the most important studies in understanding contemporary Pan-Africanism and the ideological trend of what we call an African. Yes. Right. So that concept started by Africans who were taken from Africa and who were on these plantations, particularly in the British North America. Okay. Not in Brazil, not in Cuba, but under British North America, which later was translated to the United States of America.
Okay, so you're saying, essentially, which makes sense, people who were brought over from Africa still, identified as that, essentially. Even though
people who were brought over from Africa identified themselves as Yoruba or Congolese or Congolese or Akan or Kisena, things like that. They didn't see themselves as Africans. All right, that is a concept that developed in United States, North America, by those various ethnic groups who were born with each other on plantations, and certain leadership evolved to help them understand that fighting each other was that your brother, the person that looked like you, was not the issue. And hence comes the concept of an African and the ideological framework of Pan-Africanism. There's another book that we can look at, and this is not a part of my presentation. I do this for a living, all right? This is what I do, right? So there's another book, a worthy book by a scholar. He's deceased now. His name was Sterling Stuckey, and it's called Slave Culture. the ideological origins of Black nationalism. And it was a watershed book when it came out, and it's still worthy of being read. You know, for those who really want to know, we got to get out of this, you know, knowledge ain't free and it ain't instant. You know, so a lot of people are doing, and I know this because I have students, they do it, and I tell them to stop being intellectually lazy and sit down and read, right? The most honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey would say that intelligent people rule the world and ignorant people carry their burdens, right? And so if we got a whole generation of people who are doing, who want to be intellectuals, but what they're doing is doing what I call Google reading. They'll look up a book. Google only gives you a certain unlimited amount of pages, 15 pages out of 300. Then they will come and say, I read the book. But Google skips, you know, the few pages because they're trying to sell a product. And to really get knowledge, you've got to be disciplined. And you got to really want this knowledge, and you have to sit down, and it's time consuming. So, you know, throughout this conversation, I'll be giving sources, you know, but this has nothing to do with our presentation on May the 3rd, which is going to be very powerful and very informative and life-changing.
Right. Guys, if you're on here, get those likes up for those of you who just came on. Also, shout out to Michael M with the 9.99 super chat. I see haplogroups never gets brought up. I'm concerned with the seed and culture from which I originated from, not some distant connection to another culture. Israel and Esau were related as a nation. Again, thank you so much for the support. Guys, if you're on here, get those likes up. Also, I know you mentioned, you know, the lecture that's coming up on May 3rd. So for those of you who haven't actually seen the promo that he is going to, I'm going to play it with you guys real quick so you guys can get a sense of what he's going to be doing.
Aboriginal people on this land were simply reclassified as black. So we've been here. This is our homeland.
The tens of millions of black Americans, or rather Indians, who disappeared in 1492 did not all die in the Holocaust inflicted within America. Hundreds of thousands were shipped to Europe and Africa as Indian slaves. The whole slave trade story was given to all of us in reverse.
People like Dane, Calloway, and Tariq Nasheed have great content, but their narrative is ahistorical and woefully misleading. They understand very little about our history.
All right, so if you guys are interested in learning more about that, getting connected and going deeper into the subject, definitely be sure to check it out. All right, so on to the next question. Let's see. So what do you say to those who believe that Merville Herskovitz created African studies to hide Aboriginal heritage?
Well, I don't know who's saying that, because that makes, they don't know what they're talking about. This is what I'm saying. This is why I don't even. I'll address it for a second. First of all, Merville Herskovitz did not create Africana Studies, Black Studies at all. Black Studies was created by a very brilliant young African American male. Back in those days, they called themselves Negroes or Black, and we evolved from Negro to Black, from Negro to color to Black, and or was it from color to Negro to Black, then to African American? But his name was Leo Hansberry. Leo Hansberry was a professor at a very small college called Straight College, which was formerly Xavier University out of New Orleans. In the 1920s, he created the first Africana Studies program. This is Leo Hansberry. He received his bachelor's degree and master's degree from Harvard University. And then he went to Howard University and set up the program there. But he met a lot of resistance because he didn't want Black people studying Africa like that, you know. But Herskovitz, what he did is that he was trying to encourage Black intellectuals, Black professors to start studying African culture after he had traveled around the Caribbean and Brazil and Cuba. And I think he went to Africa, and he was really studying African traditional culture. When you see me in my traditional garment in the all white, that is the garment of a priest out of the Afrikans, out of Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, who migrated from the Nile Valley region of Africa into what is now West Africa, and then got caught in the slave trade. Many of them ended up in Jamaica, some ended up in New York and New Jersey area in the 17th and 18th century, got caught up in the slave trade. And their descendants are still there to this day. How do we know? Because we have the African burial ground. See, look at me. I listen to what I just said. How do we know? Because we have the African burial ground. So what is do a Google search for what the African burial ground is. It is a place in New York where they found graves on a federal building site. And just graves, and they found some of these graves had what we now know as Akan symbols. So we know that these people were Akans, right? Mm-hmm. And their symbols. And so the Black guy out of New York in the 1990s fought the developers and said, no, you're going to put up a shrine in honor of our ancestors. And that place is still there as part of the National Park Service. So all of the talk, reverting all of this, is not making sense because we have archaeological evidence, right? And the people who are making these claims are not experts. They're lay people. Right, and they are misleading people. And this is what I said, starting on May the 3rd, I'm going to really show you a bunch of sources and documents. So the National Park Service has that information. So Merville, when they say an agent, I don't get it. I don't understand the conceptualization. What I feel like is going on is a whole lot of self-hatred, right? Because Malcolm X would often say you can't the roots of the tree, right? So, and even W.B. Du Bois in his last speech in the United States before he moved to West Africa.
Looks like your connection's cutting out a bit. I don't know if that's just me.
Is it okay?
Okay, can you repeat? Yeah, you were cutting out like the last minute. Do you mind repeating what you said?
Yeah, W.B. Du Bois, in his last speech in the United States at Johnson C. 1660, before he moves to Ghana at the request of the first president of Ghana. In his last speech, he's talking to the association. In his last speech, he's speaking to the association of African American teachers that the way that the civil.
Yeah, it's still a little choppy for some reason.
The rights movement was.
Hey, you're choppy. I might need you to come back or maybe drop out and then come back in because I haven't been able to hear.
All right, let me do
that. Okay, so minor technical issue. I know sometimes it happens with the connection. So we'll see. The internet. Shout out to Jojo. What's going on, Jojo? I see you drop the stream chat. We'll see. I know I'm trying to be mindful of this time. If I'm not able to take calls this time, we probably will later on because I'll have them on over the next few weeks to kind of continue the subject as there is a lot to cover off here. So all right. Okay, so let's see if this It's better, hopefully.
Let's see.
Okay, so I think the last thing I heard was, W.E.B. Well, you talked about Malcolm X, and then it started getting kind of choppy.
Yeah, I was saying that W.E.B. Du Bois in his last speech in the United States, before he moves to Ghana, at the request of Kwame Nkrumah, who's the first president of Ghana, who's a well-known Pan-Africanist, who studied among Black people in New York. Kwame Nkrumah was a student of Dr. Clark and Arthur Schomburg and Wiggins and other well-known Pan-Africanist intellectuals. Invited Du Bois to come and start an encyclopedia Africana and for the government of Ghana and for West Africa to dig up our history. But in his last speech, it's called Whither, Why, or Not Now. And he's basically saying that by the year 2000, he writes this in 1960, he's saying that by the year 2000, if the Black elite are not careful, they are going to forget their African forebears and spend more time talking about their supposed Indian forebears and lose connection with the rise of the African tide. And that's where we are now. Throughout this speech, it's a written speech and it's a verbal speech. And I published this first in my articles that I wrote called How Black Colleges Are Turning White, the ethnic cleansing of HBCUs in the age of Obama, where I criticized the Obama administration for neglecting HBCUs. And I got into a lot of trouble regarding that, a lot of serious trouble. But nonetheless, that speech, that whole speech was extremely prophetic. He's prophesying 40 years into the future is what is going to happen to Black folk, right? And I'll try to find that article for our thing next week and for our thing on May the 3rd. So with that said, I don't know where people are getting this stuff about Melville Herskovitz being an agent and all. He did not start Africana Studies. It was started by Leo Hansberry. Leo Hansberry is out of Mississippi, a Black man out of Mississippi. He started it at Straight College. There's even a book on Leo Hansberry, several books on him, and that documents this, and even my doctoral dissertation on the Garvey movement in Louisiana documents it too. So this is what I'm saying. I don't know where people are getting this information. People don't know. They're not even reading. You can just do a basic Wikipedia search and find some stuff on Melville Herskovitz. He was telling Black people to go back to your African past. What's an agent about that? Is that the issue, that Black people are remembering or refuse to forget what happened to them via the transatlantic slave trade? If that's the issue, then maybe the people who are propagating this information are the real agents.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't, some of the stuff, like I said, I'll hear it. I can't necessarily say I always know where it comes from. And I try to do my own research, but some of these things I think are really deep, and there's so much nuance to it. And without knowing the full historical framework, it can be easy to maybe misunderstand something or just flat out fall into a false understanding of what's actually going on. So again, I do appreciate you coming in and just share some of the different things that you've learned in your own research. Again, guys, if you're on here, get those likes up, tag anybody, or share this with someone that you think may find this interesting. So let's move on to the next question. Is there any evidence that Aboriginal Americans were reclassified as Negro and or people of color?
Oh yeah, that happened, but not on the level that people are talking about. The
Uh-oh, where'd you go? Did you freeze again? Yep, it looks like you froze again. Technical issue. I guess this filibustering. I know we see seeing some. Okay, looks like he's gonna come back in there, guys. If you're just joining here, get those likes up. Also, if you'd like to show support to what's going on, you can find me on Cash App or Venmo, Sade. If time permits, like I said, I will open up the chat line. Although that might be something I have to do for another show. But like you said, guys, I'm seeing a lot of comments come through, so I'll do my best to engage. But if you really want to have a comment be read, feel free to send in your super chat, as I will be sure to acknowledge all super chats. And I'm waiting for the guest to come in. So I guess as he's doing so, I will play again the commercial. Oh, actually, is he back here? I think he's getting back in here. Okay. He's getting back in here. Okay. Let's try this again.
I decided to take it off my Wi-Fi, Wi-Fi box.
See, that makes a difference. Okay.
Yeah, and just use my data.
Okay, so I didn't hear.
I'm in West Africa. We don't have unlimited internet. It's very expensive to have internet here. Most people can't afford it. For I'm paying for 200 gigabytes a month. It's almost $100. I only get 200 a month, and with children from America, they're always on the internet. So within 21 days, it's gone. So I have to go get more. So anyway, sorry about that.
No worries. So I now want to go back to the topic of we have this conversation about reclassification, and oftentimes they'll use, Walter Plecker, I think his name is, right, and how he essentially reclassified himself, and that being an example of essentially what's taken place. So just revisiting that question, I didn't hear anything that you said because that's what he cut off. But
what was the question again?
So is there any evidence that Aboriginal Americans were reclassified as Negro and or people of color? And that was a question.
Oh yeah, you had that going on. Some of it was deliberate, some of it was accidental, but not at the numbers of which people are talking about. Yeah, you had that going on. You had a lot of mixtures, like the guy who's with anointed hands, who's broadcasting this live on his Facebook page. He's from an area called Ahoskie, North Carolina, and the Ahoskie Nation married into the African nations that were there. You had a lot of that going on all over, and then you had some groups like the Cherokees and other large Aboriginal nations. They were a part of what's called the 5 civilized tribes, and they collaborated with Europeans in buying Africans, and they even served as scouts to catch runaway Africans, right? And that some people call maroons, right? But they were, and like the Cherokees were some of the biggest, the biggest slave owners in the United States. So a lot of people don't even know that, when they say they're Cherokee, they don't know that they were owned by the Cherokees. They weren't necessarily Cherokees in the sense that they lived on Cherokee territory, but they were slaves. And now their form of slavery may have been a little different from that of the Europeans, just a little, right? We don't hear people talking about that. And then quite recently, the Cherokee Nation kicked a lot of them out. And a lot of them still to this day don't know why they were kicked out, because they don't know that they weren't never Cherokee. They were slaves under the Cherokees. All right, and there's not a secret. There's a lot of research and books on indigenous nations that owned Africans that collaborated with Europeans. And some of them even bought Africans right off the slave ships, right off the slave blocks. And the Cherokees were big on that. They did it bigger than almost anyone. And then later, the European under Jacksonian Andrew Jackson, President Andrew Jackson, kicked them off that land and moved them west to Oklahoma.
Yeah.
These are people that were helping them, and they broke treaty after treaty, and then took the land and moved them west. And then took the land again. But when they went west, they took a lot of Africans with them.
Yeah,
so you don't hear people talking about that aspect. And my family was caught up in that. On my mother's side, our DNA, our DNA goes back to the Aku people, the Baku people of the Central African Republic, otherwise known as the Congo. That group of people is over 200,000 years old. And but on the census, according to one of my elder cousins, I have yet to see this census report. I'm waiting, where they say that that we were Chippewa, right? And I'm like, no, there's no way, because I got the DNA. They were like, no, we Native American. I'm like, no, they owned us. They owned us.
Oh, so you're saying. So you're saying, because I know, like, I talked to my Nana about this actually a few days ago, and she was saying, like, yeah, on my side there's Cherokee and Navajo, but she always identified as an African American, although she was like, yeah, we have ancestors who are this or that. She always saw it as like, we have this mixture, but I guess our primary lineage eventually comes from that. Although I know my family's from Texas, all that kind of different stuff, but literally just had this conversation.
Well, both of those groups you just named were part of the 5 civilized tribes, and because of that, they were allowed. Okay. Yes, they were allowed. I believe the Navajo, but for sure the Cherokee, they were allowed to buy and purchase and sell Africans.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And most definitely, they served as scouts and catching enslaved Africans, and they got paid for that. Runaways.
Okay, So you're saying even in your own family, you know, you grow up hearing, or people, you know, saying we're Native American, but you took ancestry and you're like, no, our blood lineage actually comes from here, so we were likely owned.
But I always knew that we were from the Congo, because everything we did was Congolese. I mean, we did the ham bone, all these things. These were Congolese. You know, when I went to the university, I got to really take time and study and understand that a lot of the stuff that we were doing within my family, that they were African. But it was just only later, about a year and a half ago, that I decided to do the DNA. And from my mother's side, which is rare, we're 100% from the Central African Republic, 100, and from one of the oldest stops of human Homo sapiens in the world. We go back over 200,000 years. We old. Wow, at least on my family's, my mother's side. And so, you know, they know I'm 100% on my mother's side. We 100% African, no mixture, even with other groups. So that means that group that came over married within that group that was forcibly brought over, I believe, in the 1850s as children, that ancestor, and they married within their group. And that's why on my DNA is 100% a cop, you know, 100%, not 79.8, 100%, which is rare. So that dispels that myth right in and there.
Interesting. Very interesting. Shout out to JoJo with the 5 on the super chat. I always appreciate the love and the support. I see. Okay. So I see we FBA claim our culture. I sent my lineage to Shay's email. I can trace my family back to the 1700s. We've been here in America as natives. Thanks for the super chat, JoJo. Shout out again to Dapper Gents with the 5 on the super chat. Much appreciated. Guys, if you're on here, get those likes up. Tag anybody. Share this with someone that you think may find it interesting. And let me see. Yeah, and also if you'd like to show support to the show, you can find me on Cash App or Venmo, Shay Sharday. So yeah, this has been a really interesting topic. I know you're going to go dwell a lot more deeply into this and share your sources. I've seen a few people in the comments asking about sources. If you guys really would like to know more about it, he's going to go far in depth on the May 3rd lecture that he's going to be doing. So be sure to sign up. Also, for those of you who are convinced that I'm from the Caribbean, no, actually, my family has been here for many, many centuries. My great-great-grandfather was an original cowboy. You can look him up, work with Bass Reeves, all that kind of different stuff. So,
and what about on your father's mother's side? What about her? Where they from?
No, the fathers, yeah, what was it? They've been here. She came over, was 1803 is when she came over. And I know on my mom's side too. Huh?
I thought it was the 1820s.
I'd have to go back and look the exact. Not 1803. Not 1803. I made that up. I'm sorry, I mixed it up. I'm not good with dates. I'd have to go back. But
it says I saw the death certificate.
Yeah.
The death certificate is from the county court. And this is what we're going to be dealing with on May the 3rd. And the death certificate of her son clearly says that the mother was born where? In Africa.
I know on both, because I did the ancestry on both sides, my mom and my dad, that could trace back to, I could trace ancestry back to Africa, right? But
and what's interesting about yours, because we have an actual official document.
Yeah.
I have the document. I had to look at and observe this document. For those who don't know, for the record, I worked for 4 years for the National Archives and Records Administration. All right, I worked as an archivist for the while I worked on my PhD, and I was able to help to write a very important book, which I got credit for. You can find it online. It's called Finding African Americans in the National Archives and Records Administration. And the National Archives and Records Administration is probably the largest repository of Black history in the United States. These are government records from various government agencies that goes back several, at least to the origins of the United States. And so I worked at the National Archives. I examined records for the United States. I put record groups together for the National Archives and the record, and while I was a PhD student at Howard. So when I hear so-called experts bringing up documents, and I'm like,
that you actually physically handled and worked with at the National Archives.
And let me tell you what else I did. I did something right as they got their money. I was the one that worked on the Japanese records, reparations records. And I can tell you some serious stories and letters that I read that were sent to the federal government about their $5,000 reparations checks. Some serious information. I assessed that record group. I worked on that record group while I was working at Archives 2 in Maryland. I worked in Archives 1 in Washington, D.C., and was later transferred to Archives 2. But I did a lot of research on both archives, the one in Washington, D.C., and Archives 2 in Maryland, College Park, Maryland.
That's a lot of.
And I'm published. I'm published. You can go online, put in Jahi Issa, National Archives and Records Administration, and you'll see the book.
Okay, so again, I guess for those who are maybe questioning sources or whatever it may be, the information is out there. And again, you're going to go a lot more in depth, with your stream. And I know some of you guys are kind of coming on later on, but I like how you started this conversation talking about cognitive dissonance and how all of us, it's somewhat of a human reaction that when we start to hear information that goes against something that we've heard essentially our entire life or have been learned to believe, it's sometimes initial reaction can be to want to fight it back or to want to reject it, even if it is true. So, like I said, take this information for what you will, look into the different sources. If you really want to learn more, tune in to the lecture that's going to be happening May 3rd. But at the very least, even if you have an emotional reaction, to a certain extent, that could be normal, but at least try to calm down and listen and read.
But at least if you have this emotional reaction, know that we have a medical term for it, right? And understand that it's normal. It's hard to accept new information, no matter how credible it is, when you have been told lies all your life. Can you imagine? I'm the son of my mother, God bless her heart, and may her spirit grow stronger in the ancestral world and grant me more protection that she has done over the years. But my mother was a Christian pastor. She had her own church, right? Can you imagine? I grew up going, Pentecostal church. I don't know if y'all know about the Pentecostal. We were the Holy Rollers, right? My mama would have us in church all night, carryover, speaking in tongues, all of this stuff, And then I go off to college, I'm doing the same thing. And then a brother walks up to me who was studying under Kwame Toure. He was going back and forth to Guinea with Kwame Toure, otherwise known as Stokely Carmichael, and said, "Look, brother, this stuff is about Africa, man. Let that Jesus stuff go." Can you imagine? I'm like, what the hell, man? What are you talking about? Jesus coming back tomorrow, brother. You better be careful. You better, I could not accept what he said. Then the brother gave me a few books, George James, book, and I think he gave me Miseducation of the Negro, and then he gave me Chancellor Williams' Destruction, which really talks about the history of Christianity. And then, he invited me to a few study groups that were going on. So this transformation, it was difficult for me. This was so ingrained in me. But since I changed my major from social work to history, right? And so I had that psychological issue. I get it. I understand. And it took a lot of time for me to get out of where I was, even with this subject of 1808, the illegal slave trade that we're going to deal with in a few weeks. I had to erase a lot of my Howard University, what I was taught at Howard University history, because this was new. And I was depressed for 2.5 years when I found out that most of us didn't come in 1619, that the vast majority of us came after 1808, and that the U.S. government has suppressed this information to this day. But look, we got your record. We got your record, sister. That clearly shows on the U.S. Census. It says that on your paternal grandmother, great grandmother, says that she was born in Georgia. But what do we have? And I told your significant other, I said, look, no, we got to have a document, because they say she was born in Canada, but the document said what? The official court document said from the recorder of deeds, the clerk of court said that she was born in Africa, not in Georgia. So why in the hell does the U.S. Census have her being born in Georgia? This is what I'm talking about. And so if you're not ingrained in this information, if you're not highly trained, if you don't know the historiography, if you don't know all the tricks of the trade, you know, everything else you may try to learn is going to be confusing. And there's a lot of confusion going on right now. So I know this is hurting a lot of people, but just bear with me, bear with us. We're here to help. I'm here to help, because I want to see as many of us get repaired. And remember, nobody can repair you but yourself. Reparations, the root of reparations is to repair. Nobody's going to repair you but you, right? So once you get this information and you were able to go to these county deeds, in which, you know, may be too late, some very funny things are going on regarding that, and you'll be shocked to find out who's covering this up. You know, hopefully we can get some type of repair, but it's going to take work. It's not going to be easy, and it's going to take you. You're going to have to think differently about what you've been taught, and this is not for everybody. Some people are going to go to their graves. I'm Native American and all of this. You know, this is not for them. Then, you know, if this is you stuck on that, then stay with the people you're with. This is for that few who really want to know.
And I want to ask, because I know you had said originally we'd asked that question. You said, yeah, there were Black people that were here, but, you know, beforehand, but they wouldn't, if they were here today, I guess they wouldn't classify themselves as Black. And you were talking about how that group was, their ancestry, I guess, was different than obviously those that came over from the Atlantic slave trade. So would you say one of the easiest ways to kind of clear up, okay, where your ancestry was would just be to do a DNA test? Would that be because if you grew up always hearing, that's
one way, but look, you know, unfortunately, you weren't in these conversations with your significant other, and we had hours and hours and hours of conversations up into the wee hours of dawn. Right now, it is 12 midnight here, almost 12 midnight here, 11 p.m. in the Gambia. We were up, and I kept telling him, look, I need a document. The U.S. Census is lying. I need an official document. Call your people and ask for a document. If this is true, we only can do this, we can only prove this if we have an official government document. And we were able to get it, but I directed him right, and based on what I thought what was going on, right? And so we can do this for other people. But like I said, this is not for everybody. This is not, if you're going to be stuck, once we give you this information and you're going to be stuck where you are, then stay there. That's fine. That means it's more money for me. Right? The more of y'all that want to be with these other groups, right? And you want to deny your true roots, that's fine. No problem. I will get your share. I will take it and do what I do. No problem.
Interesting. Again, shout out to Jojo with the 5 on the super chat. I see. Okay, the U.S. owes reparation to the people who are the descendants of the slaves who built this country. Again, I appreciate the super chat. I also saw another one come through. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Shout out to Better You with the 5 on the super chat. It says, great discussion. Looking forward to the rest of the month. Much appreciated. So I want to be mindful of time. I know we're running a little bit over. Do you have time for maybe another question or two, or do you need to wrap it up?
One more question will be fine.
Okay. Okay. Let me see. We're getting down to it. And guys, if you guys just joined, please get those likes up. Get those likes up if you're on here. Okay, let's see. So, okay, are there any political benefits to claiming Aboriginal heritage?
It depends on who's claiming the heritage.
Okay.
They're very little for a person like me because I'm not Aboriginal.
Okay.
All right, there are no benefits for me. You know, there will be benefits for me understanding my history, that war was waged on my people, that my decline, the reason why I'm sitting or where my ancestors are buried in St. Louis, Missouri, and Mississippi, and Arkansas is primarily because something happened in 1591 that talked about the decline of West and Central Africa.
Mm-hmm.
All right, something happened. Our decline, our nadir started in 1591. This is before 1619, right? And it happened because the British and the Moroccan Arabs unified themselves, made war on the last of the great West African empires, Songhai, defeated them in warfare, and it sent ripple effects all the way down the coast of West Africa, even into Central Africa, and softened up Africa for the invasion of the British. And when the British came in, the Dutch were already doing it. The Spanish and the Portuguese were already doing it. They were already going into Africa, taking people out and taking them in to Europe and to the islands and to North and South America. But when the British went in, they went in with, they were the last of the Europeans, and they went in with revenge, and they took us out all the way up into the 1890s. 1890s. Not 1790s, 1890s. And this is what I'm going to do. And it was all illegal. After 1808, it was illegal. So the reason why I'm speaking English is because of a series of events happened in Africa from 1591 onward. That opened up the British after they defeated the Spanish Armada. They made they unified with the Moors, not the Moors, the Moroccans, and they invaded Songhai with more modern weaponry, defeated them. Songhai was in the nadir, bad leadership, infighting, and it softened with that defeat. It allowed the British to go in and ravage Africa. And this is why I speak English right now. And this is why you speak English. We have to understand history in the form of global events. And when the British came into what is now known as North America, they came in and they decimated the last of the indigenous nations there. And once they killed off that labor supply, they brought in the African, who had very little immunity. Not all of the indigenous people were killed off, but a significant number were. And they brought in tens of millions of Africans. And so a lot of people say, well, how do we know? We don't have any proof of that. That's not true. We have plenty of proof of this. You just don't know because you haven't been taught, right? Okay. But, you know, May the 3rd, we're going to teach you what happened.
Okay. And that's when you're saying you're gonna, because I know seen a few in there who are like, can you cite your sources? So I know you're going to get into that a lot more deeply.
Well, I'm a university professor. I have a PhD in history. That's all I deal with is sources, and I've already given you sources.
No, you have.
I've given several sources, so I don't even know what they're talking about. At least read the sources that I've given you. But if you want something for May the 3rd, do this. All right, I'm going to give you a homework assignment. Take out your pens and paper or your iPad and do this. Do a basic Google search of the Act of 1808. All right? I want you to read the act. It's a congressional act, and it's the basis of international law regarding human trafficking. The Act of 1808. You will see the official government document. Read it. Take notes on it. Meditate on it. And then go to the Wikipedia site that says the Act of 1808. Look through it, click on each and every link, and that will open you up some to what we're going to discuss on May the 3rd. So I'm not going to give you sources just for you to have sources. I'm giving you an assignment. And so once you do that, May the 3rd, you should have a lot of questions.
That's the LOL homework. Okay, professor. You are a professor. So, well, I do.
Homework.
Right. Well, I do appreciate you coming on. I know we still have a lot more to cover off. So, guys.
Yeah. Let's deal with the Garvey movement next week, because the Garvey movement is also closely related to the illegal slave trade. This is a new research, you know, as to why so many Black people in the United States joined the Garvey. Look, the Garvey movement was nothing without the Black South. It was those Black folks. So the question is, why of the over 1,000 Garveyite branches all over the world, 70% were in the American South? Why? What happened historically that caused 70% of the 10 million followers of the Honorable Marcus Garvey were in the American South? How is that possible? What happened? Let's talk about Garvey. And then, you know, we would collaborate with my brother Stuart on the Northern Hands, and we would deal with the political and ideological origins of African Americans. I've already given you sources on that. Get Michael Gomez's book. You can get it off of Amazon or Google Books. Get the entire book. Read the first 2 chapters. All right? Don't just Google it and skip over, and take notes. And we can have this discussion. We need more and more of our people who are functionally literate and who are ready to get busy with the business of helping our people remember. Because they only get us because we don't remember anymore. All right? What we're talking about is African people who were kidnapped. Like on your mother's side, on your father's side, that woman was kidnapped because after 1808, they were not supposed to bring Africans here.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So she was kidnapped from a kingdom in Africa. So she was not a slave. She was a victim of human trafficking.
Mm-hmm.
All right? And this is something that these other guys are not telling you because they don't know. A lot of these cats have found a little lane and they making money, right? And I ain't against nobody's hustle, but when you deliberately hurting people from possibly being compensated, and they ain't gonna compensate you because they love you, they're gonna compensate you because they expect you to save them. Now, what you do when you want to go buy a Cadillac, all this other stuff we into, with yours, that's up to you. But some of us are going to do some important stuff with ours. But they are going to have to compensate because they want to save capitalism, and we're going to relate this to what's going on with Ukraine and Russia and China and NATO. Because a lot of this is going to, you just watch and see. I'm prophesying. You watch and see what's going to happen as more of our people learn the truth about what's really going on and what really happened to them, and you watch and see the reaction of the United States government.
Very interesting. Well, like I said, guys, definitely stay tuned for some more conversations. We'll be continuing this next week. I do appreciate your time, Dr. Issa. I know it's very, very late, so I hope you get some good rest after this.
Yes.
Thanks for sharing. We'll talk soon. Do you have any other maybe final thoughts or things you would like to leave with the audience before we sign off?
No, just thank you. This is my coming out session. I haven't been out in years, and some of your people may have known me from Sarnetta. I really never really had to teach. Those guys in New York are really combative. They like to fight, man. They want to fight.
Okay.
I ain't got no time for that. So, but shout out to Sarnetta, though, and my brother Reggie, and all the other brother Shaka gave me and Dr. Faragee some love the other day. Shout out to those brothers who are doing the arduous work and discipline work of reading and writing. It's not easy to sit down for 7-8 hours a day and read and write. It's very hard, right? Not everybody can do this, right? And try to regurgitate the truth to our people regarding our history and culture. We are an African people. Simple, and that has been the design by those of us who brought about this great nadir, this great Holocaust against us, is to make us forget so that we will never remember what happened to us. And most definitely, they never thought that we would go back. They never thought. That was not their plan, but they are not God. And this world is turned upside down now. We're in a new world order, right? And it's not going to look like what you think it's going to look like. These people and what they have done to other groups of people over the last 300 to 400 years, they are exposed, right? Everybody's seeing it for what it is. Maybe you can't see it in the U.S., but I'm in Africa. I mean, you hear the conversations every day, right? And so you got to decide, what is this going to look for you in 20 years? Because the U.S. is not going to be the U.S. that you know. And you got to make some decisions on what you want and what your legacy and what your bloodline are going to deal with. Mm-hmm. But you got to understand what's happening globally, and you got to have a good sense of history.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So,
that makes sense.
Yes.
That makes sense. All right. Well, thank you.
So I have given you guys some homework, numerous of sources. Start with that first, and then we can talk.
You talk.
And I'm not debating anybody, because a lot of y'all are not reading enough to even consider debating. Let's read. Let's do some real reading, and let's dialogue, and then we'll go from there.
Sounds good. Well, again, thank you for hanging out, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Take it easy.
All right.
Peace from the Banjo, the Gambia.
Okay. All right, guys. So thanks for joining. Like I said, I took a lot of notes. I have some homework to do myself. As I mentioned, and I'd had the conversation with my. Well, I guess I'll say a little bit. He had mentioned a death certificate I got from my family that showed that my great grandmother was illegally trafficked over from Africa on my dad's side. On my mom's side, there's still trying to uncover stuff there, but I know we've been there for some generations. But having talked to my nana and having her say yeah, you're obviously there's Cherokee and Navajo here, but she had always talked about her connection to Africa. So it was, I guess for me, there was a lot of, I guess there's just a lot of holes. So it's always good for me. I always enjoy talking to people who who are experts in their field or who can help kind of fill in some of those gaps, or at least provide a little bit more context or information for us to do our own research. So like I said, I have my own work to do. I hope you guys were able to take something away from this. Whether you enjoyed it or you found it disturbing, if nothing else, check out the resources, check out the things that were mentioned before you come to any conclusions. And stay tuned for next week. Like I said, he'll be here, and he'll be taking, I'm sure, valid questions from those who are really wanting to have an honest conversation. This is not here about trying to debate or make anybody look bad. We're just here trying to go over the facts and figure out what's going on. So again, I do appreciate you. And if you are interested, he's going to be doing a lecture on May 3rd. For those of you who just hopped on or hopped on later on, I'm going to just play a little bit of what's going to be happening there so you guys can get a sense and see if it interests you.
Aboriginal people on this land were simply reclassified as black. So we've been here. This is our homeland.
The tens of millions of black Americans, or rather Indians, who disappeared in 1492 did not all die in the Holocaust inflicted within America. Hundreds of thousands were shipped to Europe and Africa as Indian slaves. The whole slave trade story was given to all of us in reverse.
People like Dane, Calloway, and Tariq, Nasheed have great content, but their narrative is ahistorical and woefully misleading. They understand very little about our history.
All right. So again, if you guys are interested, he's going to be doing a lecture May 3rd. You can sign up there. And like I said, there he's going to go really, really in depth into this and just a few other things just regarding this entire topic. Again, I know he mentioned what qualifies him to do so. Obviously, a PhD historian, worked for the National Archives. I mean, the list goes on and on. So I think that's why I said, I was like, I don't pretend to be an expert. I'm going to put on my listening ears because obviously he has the resume to be qualified to talk about some of these different things. So anyways, like I said, feel free to check out the sources. Come back next week if you want with your questions, and stay tuned. We'll be continuing this. I'm still going to be covering off all the stuff. So this isn't going to be the only thing I talk about, but like I said, I'm going to be incorporating this within the next, over the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned, and thanks for hanging out, guys. And yeah, we'll talk later. Bye.